Hey, this is Jeff. Grab yourself a cup of coffee and join us at the table as we talk to another great leader about faith, church, and leadership. Welcome to the Leadership Drip. Hey friends, welcome back to the Leadership Drip podcast. If you're looking for the silky smooth vocals of my partner in crime, Rob Foltz, you won't find them today. He is actually in Virginia on some a family trip, and I believe he's honoring his father-in-law who's retiring from ministry for I don't know how long. It's a really long time. We'll have him talk about that next time we're on the show. But I'm not alone. I do have a friend with me. Her name is Hope Moquin. Hope is the Associate Director of Student Life at Free Chapel College. She's an author, mentor, communicator. Her book is titled The Second Table, and she's a friend of the podcast, and we are excited to have her on. Welcome to the show, Hope.
Oh my gosh, hello. Super excited to be here. Love what this is doing, love what it promotes, and I just love the heart behind everything that's being shared on here. And so super honored to be a part of it for sure.
Yeah, so you are you're a church of a friend of ours, a friend of Lee University's at least, Jensen Franklin. How long have you been down there?
Oh my goodness. Long story. I used to live in Georgia, then I moved to Florida for a little bit, but I moved back and I've been here going on 5 years, being on staff for almost 3, but living here for 5.
Very cool. Jensen's I think he's a Lee graduate, if I remember. I would need Rod to verify that, but I'm pretty sure Jensen's a Lee graduate and a Lee guy. So we'll claim him as one of our own. You do something different down there. You're part of what's called Free Chapel College. Now, it's not an actual college. What is it that you guys do down there?
Yeah, for sure. So Free Chapel College, it's a leadership training program, and we're in partnership with Southeastern University. And so students can come to Free Chapel, focus under one of our pastors here, get all of the leadership and ministry training while getting a degree and pursuing their dreams through Southeastern. So it's just a different opportunity for students who want to be in ministry but also want to get the degree as well, for such a lower cost than going off to an actual university. And so they get to be inside of the church while pursuing their education.
Yeah, I know some other friends of the show started something. The Seeleys at the Belonging Company have just launched the Belonging Co College. I know there's other opportunities at VU and Zoe and Highlands, and there's other sort of programs that are running very similar to this. And I think what I love about it is and I love Lee University. Please, all of our listeners know I love Lee University and love our time here. Still a student here, actually, trying to finish that master's degree. But what I feel like it gives an opportunity to you, and I hope maybe you can speak to this a little more, is a more intensive hands-on ministry experience along with the educational part of it. Give us a little bit of an insight into how students are engaging in the ministry aspect.
Yeah, for sure. We just believe that experience is something that everybody needs. And so a student comes to the Free Chapel College and they can do the certificate or the degree program, but the ministry training is still equal on both ends. That's one of the biggest confusion things that people run into. It's like, well, if I do the degree, am I going to still get the same experience as a certificate student? And I'm like, yes, you get the same thing. And so a student comes in and they get to choose between 3 different areas. And so that's Marcom, that's photography, production, all of that. Worship and creative arts for all of the singers, who is not me. I wish that I could sing, but I can't.
Oh, me too. Me too.
It's so sad, but I'm like, whatever. The Lord told me no. And then we have our pastoral students. And so twice a week, they'll have a practicum under those pastoral pastors at our church or the Marcom or whatever, and they get to learn how they do everything. They get to learn the ins and outs behind ministry, the behind the scenes, all the stuff that you don't see from the forefront on a Sunday morning. And so they get to learn all the leadership in that. And then 2 of the other days they have their educational classes, but then they have student life, which is what I do as well. And so that's the fellowship and the community aspect, and the lasting friendships. And so they really get their toes in kind of everything that pertains to ministry and real life, because there's a lot of places I feel like they'll train you everything on ministry, but then there's nothing to train you on life. And so then they get done with it and it's like, what do I even do with myself?
Yeah.
And so just kind of a little bit of everything.
Yeah.
Which I love.
Yeah. So, I mean, I had a similar experience. The Lord didn't tell me no, I couldn't sing or play. I would take guitar lessons from a guy who was a fellow student at Lee University who's gone on to be a Grammy award-winning producer. And he said, Jeff, you may not want to do this. So we don't name drop on the show, but we do. So this person has gone to quite a bit of success. But he was like, Jeff, this probably isn't for you. And I was like, well, maybe I should stick to the preaching side of things. So it's important though, and I think that's an interesting conversation, is identifying your calling, identifying what God has wired you up for. How does Free Chapel help students discover that piece of it? Like what they're called to do, what they're passionate about, how do those things kind of fall in line and merge?
Right. That is the biggest question that I ask every college student, every person I come in contact with. I always want to know, I'm like, what are you passionate about? And you
Yeah,
can't give me the simple answer of Jesus or people because
right.
that's like a known. You should be passionate about those things. But coming into the college, we do a lot of mentorship, one-on-one in small groups, one-on-one with pastoral care, counseling, all of that stuff. And so we set students up in environments and in classes, and just areas where it's a safe place for them to be able to search inside themselves, where they feel comfortable digging inside themselves. They like actually find out what they're passionate about. Because even for the students who don't want to be in ministry, wherever you go in your life, you have to have that firm foundation of who
Mhm.
you are and an understanding of who you are to be successful in whatever you want to do. And so they have small groups, and their small group leaders, they were students as well. So they went through the program and they had the discovery of who they are. So therefore, they're the leaders in that group. They're being discipled by us. And so it's like a trickle effect. It's like we pour into
Yeah.
small group leaders, and the small group leaders, they pour into their students. And it's like the small group leaders, like they're my kids. And so then the small group leaders, their group, like it's their kids. And so it's like it all forms together. And so it's just like we keep ourselves healthy and we keep pouring into those leaders, and then therefore they're going to keep pouring into those people under them. And so it's really set up healthy. We have a good team with us now to be able to do that. And so as it expands, I think our team will just continue to grow, and we'll be able to continue to do that.
Yeah. So how did you find your way there? I mean, you said you were in Georgia and then weren't and came back. So how did you get connected to Free Chapel and doing what you do?
Yeah, I lived in Georgia most of my life, and my parents and I moved us to Free Chapel when I was 13 years old. And that was just a low time in my life. I had quickly fallen into alcohol and drugs, and I was with a boyfriend at the time. And I actually had gotten myself kicked out of youth group when I was 14 years old at Free Chapel because I was just causing all kinds of chaos and just not acting right. And so I got kicked out of Free Chapel youth group when I was a teenager, and just continued on down that path. Hated the church. Didn't feel like the church was for me or that I had a spot in the church. Just the really like judgmental feeling. And so I had moved to Florida, and I did a ministry school down there. Got my life together. Praise the Lord. But at the end of those 2 years, Free Chapel College was opening up for their first year ever. And the Lord, like, just straight up, He was like, "You're going back there." And I was like, "You have me messed up if you think I'm moving back to Georgia, back to the church that kicked me out of youth group to attend their college." But it was one of those things that the Lord's going to have His way, when the Lord's speaking. So, like, I had to listen and I had to be obedient. So I moved back up to Georgia and I attended the college. And halfway through my second year, I got hired on full time. So I've been here ever since. And I tell everybody, I'm like, if you think you're too far gone, I'm like, there's hope for you. I work at the church I got kicked out of, and so you can do it.
I think God has, I call them Bethel moments, much like Jacob had to come back to Bethel or go back
Right.
through Bethel. I think sometimes God brings us back to some places that we never thought we'd go back to,
Hmm.
and good, bad, or indifferent. Some of us have great experiences at those places, and God brings us back to a place to remember that or renew that. And sometimes
Right.
there are places we had struggle, and He walks us back through that to go, yeah, remember that place because I was with you there too. And so I think we often like, and I'll be honest, it's funny because Rob and I talk about this a lot on the show, and we met at least undergraduates, like so that, and we won't say how many years ago. It was many years ago. We met an undergraduate Old Testament survey class, and never in a million years did we think we'd be back at Lee at the same time together. I
Right.
think God has this interesting way of bringing back those Bethels in our life where He showed up or was an experience, and He circles us back to those places, and we come find ourselves back there again
Right.
doing something different, the very place sometimes He was there at the first point.
Mm.
So I think that's a great story that God brought you back to Free Chapel. um, so how's that been for you? I want to touch on that because you said that at 13 church wasn't for you. So how's that walked out in your life from being, hey, this isn't for me, and you had this experience in Florida where God's kind of restored you to being this advocate for the church.
Right. That's like, I think that's probably one of the biggest things that I get asked, just because of people who have followed along with me on social media for all these years, they know what I used to post and how I was so angry towards the church and everything. And honestly, like, I don't know if I will ever be the biggest advocate of the Big C church as a whole, because the more and more that I talk to people, I've learned that people don't have an issue with Jesus. More
Yeah.
people want to know Jesus than we think. People have an issue with the Big C church, with the people inside of the church. And so for
Hmm.
me, when people would come up to me and talk to me when I was 13, it never felt genuine, or like they wanted to hear about my life to help me, but they wanted to hear about my life so they had something to talk about. And that was the biggest issue for me, is that like I need genuine people, I need authenticity.
Right.
And I would just see how people inside of the church acted in Georgia and in Florida, at a lot of churches, honestly. But
Hmm.
it's just people are human. Humans are going to be human. Humans are going to be inconsiderate sometimes. But as someone who didn't know the Lord, when you're looking at the people inside of the church to represent this Jesus person, it holds a lot more of a weight than what people really do understand. And so through the years of getting saved and understanding who Jesus was, sure, there's still going to be people in the church who don't necessarily represent Jesus the right way. But I had to learn that I can't put my judgment on those people. But what I could do was hold myself to a standard to always be representing Jesus the best way that I knew how to. So I never made someone feel the way that someone made me
Yeah.
feel. And so that's still something that I struggle with, because I see it in so many different churches. I see it because I know so many people. I meet so many
Yeah.
people, and you see it, and it's not like a shady thing to say. I think it's very prevalent, and it's a known thing that church people are the worst kind of people sometimes. And so we can't be so quick to put our judgment on them and be like, you're the reason why Christianity is the way this way. But we can just hold ourselves to a higher standard to make sure that we never make people feel that way.
Yeah, no, that's good. And I think that's what Rob and I have done some research on. What bears true is, I think a lot of people in Gen Z in your generation are really intrigued by the character of Christ. Um, I think they're often put off by the church, or at minimum their local church experience wherever they went. Now we can't make a blanket statement that all churches are bad or all churches have struggle, but it's true that some of these young adults have come out of youth groups or churches where they just didn't have a great experience, and there was, it may have just been a specific somebody who was wasn't a positive representation of who Jesus was, that pushes them away. Now my prayer is that the Holy Spirit draws them back, like in your story and in other stories we know. um but it seems to be a common story.
Yeah.
Now you're doing some things, and I know you have some, especially the Becoming Better mentorship program. So you're doing some things to kind of offset that narrative. What are you doing with young women and to kind of help wrestle that out?
Yeah. For the longest time, just growing up, I think my experiences with women, like even my own mother, I didn't have, my mom wasn't present in my life, and I got to different churches, and like just the examples that I kept on seeing in women was just so terrible, to where I like shouted from the rooftops. I'm like, I will never do women's ministry. I'm like, you'll catch me dead before you catch me doing women's ministry. And then eventually, the Lord, he was like, how about instead of complaining about it, you do something about it? And
Mhm.
I was like, but I don't want to. But I took it and I did. And so now I have a mentorship. Every month I'll take 10 girls under, and I just help them walk through the different things in their life. And so the first week it's getting to the bottom of like, what are you passionate about? What makes your heart jump? Like, what is the first thing that comes to your mind? But then the second week, getting down to the roots of like, why do I react this way? Why do I believe this way? Like, why is this something inside of me? And so determining what caused that, but then replacing it with the truth and the word of God, and like helping
Yeah.
them combat the lies of the enemy. Because as a woman, we are so vulnerable to insecurity. We're so vulnerable to feeling small, because of even how the Big C church has made it out to be that only men can be in position, only men can
Mhm.
lead. And it's like, no, but like you as a woman, like you have a purpose too. And so to help women be confident in that, and not let society or culture determine who they are, but really helping them see who they are in Christ, and just getting them set up for success. And so for that, the whole heart behind that is training women how to be the example in their lives that they didn't. And so it's been going great. I love it so much. I love seeing women on fire for the Lord and just being confident, and women being kind to each other. That's so rare
Yeah.
to find. Women need
Yeah.
to be kind.
So you mentioned mentorship in the college you now are mentoring. Um, did you have someone in your life like that? Was there someone who was mentoring you?
Yes, absolutely. So, the pastors who kicked me out of youth group, they they served me so well, and they represented Jesus to me so well. Even after that happened, through the years
Mhm.
of me being in Florida, they still reached out to me. They still loved on me. They still spoke life over me. And I really do say this, that if they would have just dropped off and wouldn't have been kind to me or loved me, I don't think I would have felt comfortable to move back and come. And I want to be where I am today if they weren't so persistent with me. And so, and he's a college pastor now. And so his wife, her name's Laura. She is like, I looked at her and I was like, I need to be this woman. Like, this is a woman who I strive to be. And so, just the most kind-hearted person. I was always there for anything. Has the best advice, and it's like she doesn't have to be in my face every single day. I don't have to see her every day, but it's
Yeah.
just knowing that there is someone who's praying for me. There is someone that I can run to. And so it's just consistency. It's just always been consistent. And I think consistency is something that we all lack, especially in Gen Z generation. It's like very quick, or it's like if I can't get something out of this, then I'm going the other direction. And she just combated that. It's like, even like, because I couldn't give anything to her and I knew that I couldn't,
Yeah.
but that didn't stop her. She still wanted me. She still wanted to give me her love, still wanted to support me and pour into me. And so really a lot of my leadership, I think, comes from how well she loved me. And I should tell her that at some point, but
Yeah, that'd be
it's
good. I'm sure she'd appreciate that.
yeah.
I think mentorship. When Rob and I are so passionate about that topic, mentoring and mentorship. We both have had mentors in our life and been mentors. Um, I can say this pretty. I say it pretty openly. That I wouldn't be who I was without the mentor in my life when I was a college student here at Lee. He's now a professor here. It's full circle. What's interesting is actually as I'm completing this master's program, I have two classes and my thesis left to write. And he will be the professor to one of my second to last class. So he wasn't even a professor; he was a youth pastor when I met him, and now he's a professor here. And life has sort of come full circle to where he's now my professor again, and sort of that mentor. But those people are so critical, and I think what you said is so important. I think it's worth pushing on, especially for our listeners. If you're going to invest in young adults, if you're going to invest in young people, this word consistency is really the key thing. And you mentioned that with Laura. How was Laura consistent even in a season when you were far away?
Yeah. I think people they hear the word consistency and they get scared of it and they want to run the opposite way because they think that it is like this lifelong commitment that takes every hour of your day. And like, that's really not it at all. Consistency can just be a simple text here and there. Consistency can be a simple phone call or a voice memo,
Mhm.
or just a little thing of like, hey, I'm praying for you. And so like consistency doesn't take every hour of your day. You don't have to dedicate your whole life to somebody, but it's just getting on a level to like, how can I serve you? Um, Consistency, like, that's not in the spotlight all the time. Consistency happens in the behind the scenes moment. And I think the biggest thing that we run into with everyone my age, honestly, is that like we just don't know how to serve.
Yeah.
Therefore, I feel like a lot of us don't really know the true character of Jesus because Jesus came to serve. His
Mhm.
question was always like, how can I serve you? Not how can I get my name known, not how can I be entitled to get to this position or whatever, but it's like, no, how can I get on your level and get in the dirt with you and know you well enough to know how to serve you? And so that's asking the right questions. That's setting time aside to care enough, to shut your mind off of what's going on around you. That's the cost of leadership, is just forgetting where you're at sometimes and what's going on around your life and
Yeah.
just shutting it off to pour into somebody else. And that's something that she does so well to this day. And so now it's like, it's not that like we as humans like discredit what we're going through as individuals, but it's just sacrifice. Like, love is sacrifice, servanthood is sacrifice. And so getting to a
Mhm.
place where that is something that we enjoy doing, that's something
Yeah.
that we care about doing, because Jesus came to serve. And if we want to be like him, then we need to learn how to do that.
Yeah. So is there moments in your ministry and in your life where you do something and you go, "Oh, that's Laura coming out in me."
Absolutely. Absolutely. Just because I've I'm like really close with their family and I've watched them go through so many hard seasons. And like even in their hardest seasons, when I started to have a hard season, it's just like in a moment, she'd drop anything and everything just to be there on a phone call or to bring food to my house. I was like, what? You're like, you want to bring food to my house? Like, what in the world? And so it's just so inspiring to like watch someone else have their own struggles, but be so willing to drop it to come serve me. And it's like a point where it's like, I don't deserve this. And it's like, it makes me squirm kind of, but it inspired me and it pushed me to be that to the other people.
Yeah.
Because it was in those moments that if she wasn't present there, I really don't know how I would have navigated through it. And I want to be where I am today if I never got through some of the other things that she helped me with. And so it's now when my students, if they need something, regardless of what's going on in my life, it's like, how can I serve them so they can get to the place where they're supposed to be?
Yeah.
And if that's through me, then that's an honor.
Yeah. And I think that's the value of mentorship in, especially in a church setting, in a faith setting, is it's the 6 words of Jesus that he said to his disciples, and it's really been sort of the linchpin as Dr. Lamb mentored me that has caused me to mentor others. It says, "Freely you have received, freely give." And the only responsibility we have is to give away what we've been given. Because the interesting part of mentorship, of faith, of the whole picture is, and it's only in God's economy that this works, that the more I give away, the more space I have for God to give to me.
Mm,
And it's this reciprocal or regenerative thing that as I pour myself out into others, all of a sudden I sense God pouring in more. And that comes through the Holy Spirit at times. It also comes through just people like the Laura's and the Dr. Lambs in our life who just keep investing and keep pouring
yeah,
in. And it seems as if the more I give away, the more room I have for God to put more in. And it expands what I'm doing, expands who I am. I think that's really one of the values of mentorship that and I think you're saying it, you found it as well, that you see Laura coming out in the things you do now in these relationships. How
right.
has that affected the becoming better mentorship program you started?
Yeah, I think just having a heart that is open to be hurt in a sense, just because I think there is a risk with mentorship and there is a risk with investing all your time into somebody. Um, that it could end up it could be a total flop.
Oh
But that's
yeah.
a risk. It could. And at the end of it, you can be like, I can invest all my time into you, and you really might not receive anything that I take or anything that
Hmm.
I give. And so I think just understanding that mentorship and leadership, it is a risk. And in that, it's like, but I have to make sure my heart is right, because I'm going into it expecting that I'm going to get something out of it, or expecting that they're going to have a complete life change because Hope said something, is not the right mentality.
Yeah.
And I learned that from her as well. It's like, I go back to the question. It's like, even if I get nothing from you, I still will give everything to you, because that's what Jesus did. And
Right.
so going into mentorships, and it's like, regardless if this turns out the way that I hope that it does, I will give you everything that I have. I'll give you everything that I know, and I will love you to the best of my ability. And it's just a risk, and it's a risk that we have to be willing to take. That we have to look fear in the face and say, "You're not going to stop me," because it wouldn't have stopped Jesus, and so it can't stop me.
Yeah, and I think sometimes if we look at the sort of Paul's explanation, sometimes we're the seed planter, sometimes we're watering, and sometimes we're the one that gets to see the harvest. And
Right.
you never know what your role is in those things.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes you get to see the role, and sometimes some of these relationships, you're just simply planting seeds that 10 years from now, somebody comes back and says, "Hey, Hope, you'll never know what that meant to me." Though we didn't see it, and we didn't see the
Right.
fruit. Um, I know the value of that. Rob and I have talked about on several occasions people who've come back to us 8, 10 years later and go, "You never know the impact that moment made." And we go, "Those were moments we didn't think we made any difference," you know. And sometimes it's
Right.
just the seed we're planting that's making the impact in that moment for longer term. And I think that's significant. We got to keep planting seeds, even if we don't see the return right away. We got to keep planting seeds. So
Right.
that's awesome. I want to shift the conversation a little bit. You have the mentoring program. You also wrote the book, The Second Table. What led you? And you have another book, How to Write a Book, right? An ebook.
Right.
So you
Yes.
got 2 books. Let's not discredit you. Um, what led you to write the book, The Second Table?
Yeah, I had known for years that I wanted to write a book, and I finished it, like finished the whole book twice, and I deleted it twice, like
Oh,
emptied
mercy.
the trash icon, deleted. And I know I was like, oh gosh, but it was one of those
I
things
would
like,
be on the phone with Mac. I'd be like, "How do I get it back? Where did it go? How do I get it back?"
honestly, gosh. And so it was a process, but the one that did end up getting published took me about a year of sacrifice, of not hanging out with
Hmm.
my friends, of not doing anything except for writing this book. And so um, I wanted to write it because I have been a reader my entire life, and there's so many incredible books out there, but there's also so many books that that are not inviting to sit down at a table and have relatability. And so there's so many books where it's like people talk about their stories, but in such a surface level way, to where it's like, oh, I hurt in this season of my life, but that's it. But it's not vulnerable enough. It's not transparent enough for people to really read it and be like, oh my gosh, like me too. And so I wrote the book in a way that is completely contradicting to what is socially acceptable for vulnerability. And so I wrote it in such a raw and transparent way to where I wanted anyone to read it, for them to be able to look at and say, me too. To expose all of my junk, to put
Yeah.
everything out there, to use everything that the enemy meant for bad, but turn around and use it for good. And so it's my life story, but it's written in a way to where it's not just like, oh my gosh, is this hope story? But it's something that can relate and can sit down with anybody in any season of life. And then there is a huge section of the whole church mentality, of the I'm sorry if you hate Jesus because of me, and just church culture as a whole and everything, and how to combat that. And really, just the essence of the book is using your mistakes for good, and how Christianity isn't having it perfect all the time. It's not always making it right, but it's always getting back up and using your mistakes to impact other people and not letting the enemy keep you down.
Yeah.
And so that's my heart behind it.
Yeah. Where's the title come from? The second table. I when I first thought, I thought, well, I know what the kiddie table is. That's where I sat at Thanksgiving for many years. That was kind of the second table, but that's not what you mean, right? It's not like the kiddie table at Thanksgiving, is it?
No, that is so funny. I love metaphors. The Lord really speaks to me through metaphors,
Yeah.
just imagery. And when I first got saved, I got saved at 16. It was like right when I turned 17. I just had this imagery in my head of this man who was walking through a forest, and he sat down at this first table. And at the table, it had everyone they were wearing masks, and they had their luggage next to them, and it was zipped up. And everyone had to sit so uptight, and the man just felt so uncomfortable there. And in the imagery, he got pushed out of that table because he just didn't fit in there. He couldn't fit to their perfection, he couldn't conform to it. So he kept on walking, and he was walking by himself, but he wasn't lonely. Just because you're by yourself doesn't mean you're lonely. The
Yeah.
Lord is
True.
always with you. And so he got to the second table, and everyone at the table, they had their mask off of their face in front of their table, and they had their luggage sitting next to them. And they were all picking stuff out of their luggage and laughing about it and throwing it over their shoulder. And like in that moment, he found a spot at that table and he stayed there. And so I say all that to say is that, like I said, Christianity isn't the perfection, pretending that you have it all together, but it's actually using everything that was supposed to be luggage and using it as a way to relate with each other and to laugh about it and to move
Mhm.
forward. And so just always choosing to sit at the second table with anybody that you come in contact with, that people aren't looking for perfection, but people need raw and people need authenticity, and they need someone that they can say, me too.
Yeah. No, I think that's so true. I think, um, and you're quite a bit younger than I am, so let's just point out the obvious in the room. You're a digital native, and so the early part of Instagram, especially Instagram, was these curated, well documented, perfect photos, and
Right,
so it became very difficult to have Me Too moments with anybody on social media because they were so filtered and perfected that oftentimes people felt flawed in comparison to that.
right.
So as a digital native, as a person who has lived through that, um, how have you got to a place of being comfortable? And listen, I understand vulnerability; it's never really comfortable,
Right.
but comfortable enough to be like, here is me as I am, take it or leave it. What was that process for you?
Right. I am walking through that now and just different things in my life. I really live on the line choosing courage over comfort.
Hmm.
And like I'm still human. When I see people in their picture perfect lives and everything, I get super insecure sometimes. So I'm like, your life looks perfect and mine is not. But I
Right.
have to remember that like it is just a screen. And like I know we hear that 24/7 all the time. It's like Instagram is just Instagram, but it still irks you sometimes. But just remembering that like everyone has their own problems, and it really just starts with one person to be open and honest about it. And so for
Yeah.
me, the biggest thing that I've learned through all of that is that I am who I am, whether I put 1,000 filters on my photo or not, whether I write the captions that make my life look perfect. Like I am who I am, and I will never have to convince anybody that my motives are pure when I'm in alignment with the Lord. And so that's one
Right.
thing I want to encourage anybody is that, like, at the end of the day, like, perception's reality, or like people think this, but it's like, who cares? Because if someone's going to cast judgment on you or put their opinions on you, it's really not your problem. It's their problem because they're the ones who's putting their judgment
Yeah.
on you. And so it's like, you be in alignment with the Lord. You understand that you don't have to convince anyone that your motives are pure if you're in right standing with the Lord, and you use your open and honesty for other people, so then that they can be encouraged and inspired to use their open and honesty, and hopefully slowly by slowly we can begin to change this whole facade of always being perfect and always making our lives look like they're the best things in the world.
Yeah. No, my wife and I have an expression that we tell our kids that wherever you go, there you are. Like, so even if you go to social media and post something, there you are. You can craft it however you want, but the real you is still the real you. It's not going to
Right.
change. So, you know, if you move away and go to college, or you move away and do whatever, wherever you go, the real you goes with you.
So
And I
good.
think that's so important to go. And it's so hard. And listen, it's not just young adults, grown adults still have this struggle of going, hey, look at everybody's life, look at their vacation, look at their car, look at their house, look at whatever, whether it's on social media or real life. And then we see it, like, must be nice to have bushes that look that neat. You know, that's like what old people say, like, your yard's so nice, I wish my, whatever it is. That's what, when you're in your 40s, you start talking about grass and bushes and things like that. But the comparison is still there, and it's still a difficult thing to walk through. And vulnerability is so tough. And you're a reader, and I went through a season of life where the Lord really pushed on the vulnerability issue with me. I read 3 books back to back that I would never recommend reading back to back. I read Daring Greatly by Brene Brown, who is Vulnerability and Shame, Scary Close by Donald Miller, which is a memoir of him coming out of his shame issues. And then there's a John Bevere book. I can't think of the name of it right now. Shoot. Intimidation, Breaking Intimidation.
Yeah.
I think I cried for 3 months, like just
No way.
sobbed as I read these books, like this is, and like vulnerability was not something I was good at, and I'm like, oh, it's so bad. Um, but it's important that as healthy believers, and you know this, Hope, that we come to a place where we can be transparent and vulnerable, and it is risky.
Right.
It is challenging. There is a cost involved. So as you wrote this book, The Second Table, and kind of laid out the story of what God did in your life, was there ever a moment you go, this is too risky?
For sure. For sure. Even in my day-to-day life now, I'm like, this is risky. But um at the end of the day, I have to think back to when I was 13, when I was 15, when I was 18.
Yeah,
What if somebody was that open and honest with me? What if I knew someone else had dealt with this too? Someone else
that's
was
good.
walking through this too? It would have changed the whole trajectory of my life. And I'm happy that it didn't, because I am who I am because of it. But
Hmm.
if I can suck up my pride and just put it out there, like, this happened to me, I did this, I dropped the ball on this for the sake of helping someone else not walk down that same path, then that is okay.
Yeah,
And it's when we are too prideful to not be open and honest, that's where we really need to search our hearts and our soul, because that's not okay. We're
yeah,
all human, and it is our responsibility to use what we've walked through to help other people, to not walk down that, and to show them that there is a better way, and that even if you do walk down that, even if you do fall, that there's still grace, that there's still hope, and that there's still a future. And so
yeah,
there's always good.
yeah. My again, we talk about mentoring throughout this whole thing. My mentor, Dr. Lamb, I call him William because he wasn't doctor when I met him, but Dr. Lamb um, used to say quite a bit. God has a way of turning your pain into pulpits. That he wastes
Good.
nothing, and I think that's a significant story in your life, that God is using what was painful and making a pulpit or a platform, a place for you to share that, to help other people. Um, and which is interesting is because, and we've talked to a couple other people in the sort of the same um, tribe as you, which we found it really part of the intrigue of Gen Z is this entrepreneurship of young leaders such as yourself. Do you know Hannah Granowski?
I do, yes.
Okay, so we had
Right.
Hannah on the show earlier this season, and with Generation Distinct. We've talked with Carson Case, who is a great young man. We talked with Luke
Right.
Lazone and others in this sort of space. And there's this unique tie-in between ministry and entrepreneurship. And again, you guys are digital natives. You know the language of Instagram, Twitter, TikTok, all the things better than we do. What sort of has led you specifically into being able to go, okay, so I have this platform and I have this message, and I can use it to connect somebody else and help somebody else, and also, and I think it's a good thing, help sustain you financially. Where's that coming from, do you think, in your generation?
Right. Um, I've thought on this a lot, and so I think there's two sides to it. I think that our generation specifically wants to create things for the people of our age, just because a
Hmm.
lot of churches are so accustomed to their traditional ways, and a lot of people our age don't necessarily feel like there's a spot for them. And so, one of the two of like the great things of our generation is that they are so proactive. They will go out, they will get what they want, but they want it now, and they don't want anybody to
Right.
stop them. They want it right now. If they don't get it right now, then they're gonna lose their minds. But then on the other side of that, like as good and proactive as that is, then like kind of like what we talked about with the servanthood is that we kind of miss the whole process of like serving the house, and then and the
Yeah.
progress and the process of that. So therefore, that's where the character flaws come in, is that we have this entitlement of we are going to make this happen, so now we're the boss of it, but we don't know how to serve. Therefore, we don't have good character because it's like my way or no way. And so for me, I've served in the house for a while. I love my job. I love my students. I feel like they're my own kids. But for me, um, I knew that with the sword the Lord's given me and with the things that He's put inside of me, that there's still more people that I could reach if I put my foot towards it. And so
Hmm.
it's a really season of learning how to balance all of it. So my priorities are still in line, but um, to be able to do more for the people who are outside of the walls that I work in. And I only charge for it just because then I can put more time to it. And I don't have to try to get a second job to be able to sustain myself. And like, I hate charging for it. It took me so long to like even like put any money towards anything. So I'm like, I want to do everything for free. But I'm like,
Yeah.
I had to like really suck it up honestly and be like, this is what I have to offer, and it's okay to charge for it a little bit because it is benefiting somebody else.
Yeah.
And it's not out of like a bad heart. And so it's like it's been a whole lot of like internal processing because I hate
It's,
it.
listen, we've wrestled it. And a couple things I know is if somebody doesn't pay for something, they don't value it. Something for free is
Right.
not valued very often. So, and we just talked with Allie Worthington on the show, and Allie is a businesswoman minister, and she talked with us about the tension of that,
Hmm.
the tension of being able to do business and ministry, and that a lot of times she's helping leaders create what John Acuff would call a side hustle,
Right.
but it's something out of their heart and their passions and their gifts that God's given them, that's good work, that's also helping sustain the ministry aspect of their life. Because and she said this, it was funny, she goes, nobody goes into ministry thinking they're going to make $10 million a year. If they do,
Right.
they're probably doing it wrong. So like that's just the
Exactly.
case. If you're making $10 million preaching, I don't know where you're preaching, because like that ain't happening in most places.
Right.
So there's a tension, and I've walked through it, and my grandfather was a pastor, and he was bivocational, what we would title bivocational. He worked, a job or had a business, and so I think there's some value to what you're doing, and excuse me, and I think some of the leaders that are listening even wrestle that tension, especially older leaders,
Right.
because there's often been a mentality that as pastors, preachers, as ministers, um, that money is the root of all evil, not love of money. That
Mhm.
if we make too much, then we're not really serving the Lord. And I don't think that's what we're saying here. I think what we're saying is that there's opportunity to serve people well and be compensated for what God has given you. And that's essentially what you're doing with the Becoming Better mentorship, with your book, with the other resources you're putting out. Um, and I think that's a good thing. And I think we're seeing it in Gen Z, especially because you mentioned something, and I want to touch on, is there's an overall feeling sometimes that there's not space for you.
Mhm.
Do you feel that and again, feelings are not always the most authentic
Right.
representation there, but I think that there's some truth to it that Gen Z feels like, especially in the church, they're having to carve their own space.
Yeah, I think with a lot of the people that I've talked to is that that is like a recurring, I don't want to say an issue, but it's something that's lacking for
The
sure.
struggle. Let's call it as it is
Yeah,
struggle.
it's a struggle for people our age, of just like not feeling accepted or not feeling like it's relatable or it's able to help them or grow them. And so I think that that is why so many people are always searching. So many people are always trying to make something else just
Yeah.
because they walk into the church and there's judgment or they don't feel welcome. And if you don't feel welcome, you're not going to stay somewhere. If you don't feel welcome, you're not going
Yeah.
to be receptive of anything that's there. And so that's why they go out and they try to create something else. But then again, I'm like, I feel like that falls back into the whole church culture thing of the people inside of the church, and that maybe that's why. And so it's not maybe necessarily the traditions that some churches are caught on, and maybe it's not necessarily the services, but maybe perhaps in fact it is the people that's the underlying factor in all of it. And I think that might be something for everyone to have a heart check in, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. No, I agree. I think I'm a huge advocate of local church. I still think it's the vehicle that God uses to get the gospel spread in the world. And I think as people being the local church, not just the buildings and the structures and the organizations, but the people being the church, is what's going to carry the gospel around the world. Now we have new vehicles such as social media and ways to stream. And I think even during this time of pandemic, the gospel has spread further than it's ever spread just through some of those channels. So I think there's the tension, and I think the other tension, like I can speak for someone who's in his 40s. We were part of the wait your turn generation. Like there were so many leaders ahead of us. We were waiting our turn, and
Right,
sometimes we got our turn and we want younger leaders to wait their turn. Like
right.
in your generation, and it's one of the great things about Gen Z and younger millennials, they're just not going to wait around. And so
Mm-hmm.
they take what God's given them, they make opportunities, they create platforms, they create resources and go forward. And that's encouraging because I don't know that, and I'm an advocate of getting young leaders in place early to learn and to grow. And that's what you had as your experience. We advocate that on the show. We advocate that to leaders who listen, find young adults, put them in place. We talked to Adam Weber. He was telling us about a sophomore in high school who's leading worship at their broadcast campus.
Wow.
So, I mean, that's taking a risk on somebody but putting trust in somebody who's young. So I think if the church responds by going, here's space, here's opportunity with the safety net, I think that's always important. Strong leadership going, hey, we're gonna walk you through this. We're gonna walk with you in learning to lead, with this safety net that when they fall, they're picked back up and go, all right, here's what we did wrong. We go forward from that.
Right,
Um, I think then these two things can coexist well. Serving
right,
the church and having this sort of side hustle, resourced sort of opportunity for people where they won't sit in tension of one another. Does that make
right.
sense?
Yes, 100%.
Okay. And so I hope even as older leaders, I'm not really I fall somewhere in the middle. I don't like calling myself old. Like I try to think of myself as young, but leaders that are not part of Gen Z or the younger millennial generation, we would be comfortable with creating resources. We'd be comfortable with putting things out there to help people and making some income. And again, you can listen to the Allie Worthington episode. She talked a lot about that and doing some of those things. So I just think that's important conversation.
Right,
And here's what I love about your story, and we'll kind of wrap up this conversation that way, that you were given space early, it seems like, the folks at
right.
Free Chapel. Um, Tell me just a little bit about that, and we'll kind of wrap up with that thought. What was it like to be 18, 19, 20? I'm not sure. You said you'd been there 2 years, and be approached to be on staff at a church.
Right. Right. I came on staff when I was 20, when I was 20 years old. And so it was something that I didn't struggle with too much just because I have a long story. I dropped out of high school and I started a ministry college when I was 16. And so I did 2 years there and was in leadership positions when I was 17, 18 over people who were like 27. And so I had to really deal with my age factor back then. So when I came to the college, I was still the youngest. I think I was still the youngest my whole class when I got hired. But I think I just had to really understand and recognize that it's not anything that I did to get hired. And that's what I live my life by now. It's like, I don't know how I am where I am. I don't really know how I'm doing the things that I'm doing. I don't know how the Lord trusts me to
Yeah.
lead the capacity that I am. And then again, I feel like that might be like why he does let me, because I'm so dependent on him. And I'm like, I'm like, Hope didn't do anything. Hope is not the smartest person in the world, but like, I love the Lord and I'm dependent on the Lord, and I will make sure that what I'm sharing is from the Lord. I'll always give truth before my opinion. And so it's like, I don't know how that even happened, but I just know the one who allowed it to happen. And
Yeah.
so I think in my own human flesh, I struggle sometimes with my age, because I'm like, oh my gosh, all of you guys are still older than me, but here it is. But just always point people back to the Lord and just be dependent on the Lord, be in constant remembrance of where I come from. That always keeps me in understanding of who I am and who I am in the Lord and what He's done. Because it's not anything that I did, but it's just I just said yes to the Lord, and here we are.
Awesome. I love that. Well, Hope, let's wrap up. We have one final question we ask every one of our guests that come on the show, and you had some experience in a non-traditional college setting. We are here on a traditional college setting, but I think the question is still a great one. What is one lesson you learned in college that did not take place in a classroom?
Right. More than anything, I think that I have learned to just simply be present. You don't always have to have the right things to say. You don't always have to have the right plan in place. But if you just show up, you just be present, the Lord will open the doors to get you where that is. And so be there on time, have the character to show up on time and to stay, be the last one to leave, help, serve, just be present as much as you can. That whether that be at an event, whether that be at a conference, whether that be in somebody's life. Just be present and show up. You don't always have to have a perfect plan or the perfect things to say, but if you can just be present, the rest will fall into place.
Awesome. That's so good. Be present. That's a great advice. How can we stay connected to you, Hope? Where can we find you on socials?
Absolutely. Instagram is my main one. Trying to hop on the Twitter train, but I really don't know if it's going to happen. So Instagram is my main thing, and then I have a website, hopemoquin.com.
Okay. So make sure you follow Hope and pick up some of these resources. The book, The Second Table, it's going to be a great read and really going to help you guys. And as we always say here at the Leadership Drip, you have a seat at the table. Hope, thanks for coming on.
Thank you.
Hey friends, thanks for listening to this episode of the Leadership Drip. We loved having you at the table for this conversation. Would you do us a favor and comment, rate, subscribe, and share on your social media? That way we can get this content to other great leaders. And stay connected with us on Instagram at The Leadership Drip and on Twitter at Leadership Drip. And remember, you have a seat at the table.